The Team Rocket expansion brought about new Dark Pokemon cards that had slightly more powerful attacks in exchange for significantly less HP. Among these were 3 new Dark Evolutions, and they comprised a deck called EvilTron, which was a Rocket version of the EeveeTron deck. If you haven't seen my video on that, go ahead and pop over there to get the general gist of how the deck works. Like the EeveeTron deck, EvilTron focuses around the promo Eevee that has chain reaction. Instead of using Ditto like EvilTron does, I have opted to use Dark Gyarados in this deck as a support Pokemon instead. Magikarp's Rapid Evolution attack lets it evolve as an attack, which can set off those chain reactions. Dark Gyarados is also searchable with Boss's Way, which this deck is going to use early game to find your initial evolution cards. Dark Gyarados also has a very interesting ability called Final Beam that I do want to talk about a little bit before we get into this. So when Dark Gyarados is knocked out, you flip a coin, and if heads, it deals 20 damage to your opponent's Pokemon for every water energy attached to Dark Gyarados. This can be really helpful in getting revenge kills and also stalling out your opponent if they don't want to risk taking that much damage. This ability can be shut down with special conditions, but the official rulings state that if Dark Gyarados is knocked out before your opponent flips the coin for a special condition, that Final Beam will still happen. Final Beam will also trigger before the effects of Pokemon attacks, such as with Dark Alakazam's Teleport Blast. Before it goes to the bench, you can actually deal the Final Beam damage if you get the coin flip. And this ruling is also important for the promo Eevee, because with this format you now have Dark Golbat. And when Dark Golbat evolves, it deals damage to a Pokemon. And for the Eevee, its chain reaction effect is going to kick in first and let you evolve it before Dark Golbat can deal that 10 damage with its ability. And with that out of the way, let's get into EvilTron. So we do have the 4 chain reaction Eevees. You're going to be using those to get as many on the field as you can at once, preferably all 4 of them. As soon as you evolve one of them, or as soon as your opponent evolves a Pokemon, you can just upgrade them all as long as all of the evolutions are actually in your deck. And then we'll be running 2 of each of the Dark Evolutions. Out of these 3, I would say you'd probably be using the Vaporeon the most of all, even though you are wanting to choose which ones you evolve into and use based on your matchup. Because the one thing that is really noticeable about these 3 cards, as well as all of the Dark Pokemon, is that they have really low HP for Stage 1s. You can't really do much with only 50 HP on a Stage 1. You're going to take damage way too fast. The Vaporeon has 60 HP, so it is a little more usable. But again, you will be playing purely off of top advantage for using the Jolteon and the Flareons probably. And there'll be 3 Magikarps and 3 Dark Gyarados in this deck. The Magikarp has that Rapid Evolution attack that lets it evolve, which is a bit of a strange ruling considering that Eevee can get around Aerodactyl's ability because it doesn't evolve in the same way as usual, but when this Magikarp evolves using a similar method, it actually will trigger that chain reaction. 4 copies of Boss's Way to help get those evolution cards really fast, or at least your initial one. Again, you do want to keep most of them in the deck. That's why you want to use your Professor Oaks and your other draw power more sparingly, because you don't want to have the evolutions actually in your hand. That way you can't use chain reaction. Plus power is a must because you have to deal as much damage as possible, because these evolutions will get knocked out very quickly. Gust of Wind to help get the easier knockouts, pull out some weaker cards on the bench, or to pull out a Pokemon that your opponent's been setting up. You can go ahead and knock it out and kind of ruin or stall out their setup. For this deck to really function as a rogue deck, you have to play fast and you have to play smart. You really have to get those simple knockouts when you can, so that you can set up those Gyarados and stall out and maybe get better knockouts later. The energy search is in here, of course, because you're using 3 different types of energy. You want to make sure you can get what you need in your hand. Unlike the evolution cards, these don't have double colorless attacks across all 3 cards. They actually have 3 different kind of setups for what each Dark Evolution does. So you really are having to change your playstyle dramatically depending on what kind of matchup you're in, because the Jolteon's going to play way different than the Flareon or the Vaporeon or even the Dark Gyarados. And I have 4 Rainbow Energy in here, which can be counterproductive because they add 10 damage on whatever you place it on, but they're in there for the speed of the deck. You really want to make sure you can get the energy you need on an evolution to get really quick knockouts. And because the attacks on these dark evolutions aren't really uniform, the energy is a little more unevenly distributed. So I have 5 lightning energy, 4 fire energy, and then 7 water energy, because you're going to also want to use those on the Magikarp for rapid evolution, and then for Dark Gyarados' attack, as well as that final beam chance. So the general playstyle of this deck is to get as many basics out at a time as you can. Ideally, you can get all 4 Eevees, maybe a couple Magikarps down. That way, as soon as your opponent evolves, or as soon as you get the chance to evolve one of your Pokemon, which is almost always on turn 2, you can do that chain reaction, evolve all of your Eevees at once. Because you're running Boss's Way in this deck, you almost always get the evolution card that you need on turn 2. In playtesting, I found that the best thing to do is to get a Magikarp down early, use Boss's Way on turn 2 to get that Dark Gyarados, and go ahead and evolve it. Don't worry about using the rapid evolution, because any evolution can start that chain reaction. That way you can just pull out whichever evolutions you're going to use for your particular matchup. Go ahead and evolve those, and maybe have a couple of backup ones. For example, in a Rain Dance matchup, I know that Blastoise is weak to Lightning, so I'm going to set up the Jolteons first, but maybe have the Vaporeons and Dark Gyarados as my backup mons. For matchups against decks that are a lot faster and hard-hitting like Wigglytuff, you probably want to lead with your Vaporeons, because you don't have any type advantage over Wigglytuff, so you want to put out whatever can sustain a hit and then still get off an attack. Ditto can still be very useful in this deck, and actually I would say that it's actually more viable. However, I wanted to use the Dark Gyarados in this deck since it is a rocket deck, and you can abuse that Boss's Way a little more to get more evolutions faster. But Gyarados does have a lot of utility in that it can be really scary for your opponent. If it's fully loaded to attack with 3 energy, your opponent's basically having to risk trading knockouts with you. Gyarados also helps cover Vaporeon's weakness. It gives the deck a secondary water type option to use that's weak to grass instead of lightning. Because these dark evolutions have such low HP, the majority of the time they're going to get knocked out by 1 attack. That's why I don't mind using the Rainbow Energy. It helps you get off an attack faster, and that 10 damage isn't going to matter much when whatever your opponent has set up is going to be dealing at least 50 damage to you anyway. But if you are worried about it, this is one of the only decks that I would recommend using Defender, which can help you survive an attack in certain circumstances. You can also run the risk of running out of Eevees if they get knocked out early, or if you are relying heavily on a certain dark evolution and both of those get knocked out, you don't have any more to use. Because of that, I would actually really recommend using Nightly Garbage Run, which was another great rocket addition. Looking back over this deck list, I think I would actually replace 1 or 2 of the Boss's Way trainers with Nightly Garbage Run, because you're only really going to be using Boss's Way early in the game, because that chain reaction is going to take all of your evolutions out of the deck, so you won't need to search for them. And Nightly Garbage Run is just a great addition to any deck, so that you're not decking out, and so that you can keep recycling the main utility cards for whatever deck you're using. For the most part, the Pokemon that were introduced in the Rocket expansion are all pretty unusable, mainly because of the low HP, although they do have some really fun gimmicks in abilities and attacks, so I do want to explore some more of those in future Rocket decks, so stay tuned for those. As always, comment down below, let me hear what you think about this deck, or if you've ever used this deck before. And until next time, bye you guys!